This year, the elves built something new to speed up Santa's rounds, a supersonic sleigh to beat the speed of sound. They'd worked so hard to finish it in time for Christmas Eve, but though it sparkled and it shone, the ground it would not leave. "Hey-ho!" cried Santa. "Never mind. Next year I'll fly by rocket." He didn't tell them that he'd slipped a spark plug in his pocket. For Santa likes things as they are and not how they might be. "Please fetch my old sled from the store and I'll use that," said he.
"We'll be some time,"
The elves replied.
"so while we get the sleigh, you'd better make a start on foot. We'll catch up soon. Okay?"
Very few have ever caught more than a fleeting sight of Santa Claus at work because he works so late at night. And usually he flies so high you'd need a telescope to catch a glimpse of sleigh and deer. They disappear like smoke. This year, of course, was different, as he set out on his own and people were astonished to see him in the town. A group of carol singers were sure that they could see a flash of red on rooftop. But no, it couldn't be. And skaters on an icy pond were frozen in mid-slide. Was it the Caped Crusader or Santa they espied? But luckiest of all of these was a small boy with his sled who had a perfect hidden view as Santa plowed ahead across the park and out of sight, his cold breath on the air. The boy kept it a secret. Now it's one that you can share. The news reached Santa that his sleigh was fixed and almost ready as he set out to row across to the lighthouse keeper Freddie. "It's just as well," thought Santa as he pulled against the storm. "You can't land reindeer on a rock. They could well come to harm." He left Fred's presents, woolly socks, a fresh supply of candles, a compass, books, new razor blades, and a shaving mug with handles. Then off he set and made for land, where his old team was waiting. But first he had to stand in line at customs. So frustrating. The man in charge looked most severe and peered at Santa's pack. "Have you got something to declare inside that heavy sack?" "Oh, yes," said Santa with a smile. "Tomorrow's Christmas Day, and if you hold me up too long, I can't get on my way. And that means all the children who are waiting for these toys will be gravely disappointed and unhappy, girls and boys." "We can't have that," the man replied. "You'd best go right on through. I've got 2 kiddies of my own, and I don't know what I'd do if they woke up tomorrow to find their stockings bare. You'll want your reindeer, I suppose. Turn left, first right. They're there." Out in the car park, Santa Claus and deer were reunited. I didn't tell you everyone was happy and delighted. The reindeer grinned, and Santa grinned as they set off together across the crowded frosty skies as light as any feather. Now anyone who's flown a sleigh can tell you rooftop landings are tricky in these modern times and need quite careful handling. But Santa is an expert, and his reindeer are the best, so they hardly stir a snowflake when they first come down to rest. There's a well-known saying about the plans of mice and men and how things seem to be just right, but all go wrong again. That's how it was for Santa as he recommenced his round, for as he clambered from a stack, a meter maid he found. "You can't give me a parking ticket," Santa told the warden. "I always park on this roof here." "Oh, dear, I beg your pardon," the warden said sarcastically as she surveyed the reindeer. "I'm booking you these 8 hippos, too. You're in a no-sleigh area." "Stuff and nonsense," Santa said. "And anyway, there's 9, and they're not hippos or giraffes. They're reindeer, and they're mine." "There's only 8, the warden sniffed, "but that is academic. If we let you land rhinos here, it could start an epidemic." With that she went, in dudgeon high, leaving Santa feeling troubled, for there were only 8 deer left. And so his troubles doubled. For when he counted them again to double-check for error, the missing deer was Rudolph, the famous red-nosed fella. And Rudolph is the only one who knows where every present's bound. He knows directions and locations, each single inch of ground. He'll turn up soon, I have no doubt, to lead us on our way. It will affect my schedule, though, and cause us some delay. He hopped onto a passing cloud and peered around in vain. For Rudolph had completely gone. That much was clearly plain. The next few calls were simple, much to Santa Claus' delight. And then he made for Halfway House. It was halfway through the night. There, fresh supplies were waiting to be loaded on the sleigh, and Santa asked if Rudolph had been seen along this way. The elves were just as puzzled and were just as much perplexed, but none could make suggestions as to what he should do next. They had another problem, too, which caused him fresh alarm, for they had presents packed to go with no addresses on. "They say to Tom," the elves declared, "but that's our only clue. We've searched our files and scratched our heads, but can't think what to do." "Oh, botheration," Santa cried. "What more can go amiss? Jet propulsion, parking tickets, then Rudolph goes, now this." He left the stores with his new load and stopped along the way to ask the North Wind Giant, "Could you hold your breath till day?" The giant smiled. He understood and promised not to blow. "But you'll get a gust from time to time. I have to breathe, you know." He also said that he would keep an eye out through the night in case a wandering Rudolph should come trotting into sight. Meanwhile, everyone was asleep, snug as bugs in young Tom's house, except for Puddin', his small cat, and his even smaller mouse, whose name was Arthur, by the way. And Arthur was quite worried. "He's never been this late before," he said, then quickly scurried across the garden deep with snow to get a better view. But though he looked and peered and stared, he spotted nothing new. No Santa Claus in coat of red, no reindeer, and no sleigh. But worst of all, no presents for young Tom on Christmas Day. But I can tell you Santa Claus has never given up. With gifts delivered, thanks to a map, he sent his reindeers out. "You find that rascal Rudolph and you tell him to go home. I'm sure in time I'll find this Tom, but I'll do it on my own." A snowman who had overheard said, "Do my ears deceive? I know a boy called Thomas. He built me, I do believe. He also gave me this old scarf and these old gloves and hat." But Santa checked his list and sighed. "Wrong Tom," he said, "alas." Lights from an artist's studio caught Santa's eyes just then. Inside, he found a painter, hard at work with brush and pen. Amid a pile of paints and pots and other tools of trade, a wonderful new masterpiece was slowly being made. The artist listened carefully to Santa's tale of woe and then said, "I know, I've got it. Why don't I, before you go, draw up a picture of this boy to help you win this race?" But Santa sighed. "No good," he cried. "I've never seen his face." While seeking inspiration and a place to warm his feet, old Santa sipped a glass of milk and had a bite to eat. He asked around if anyone could help him in his quest. "One clue is all I need," he said, "and I can do the rest." A man at the next table said he knew someone called Tom, but he was 85 years old, so couldn't be the one. With heavy heart but warmer feet, Santa went on his way, but had a mix-up with his hat, which caused him more delay. The hours flew by so quickly, and daylight crept so near. Then Santa met a watchman who helped lift his dark despair. "I know most folks around these parts," he said, "so you tell me what's in those boxes for this boy. They'll give a clue, maybe." "Good thinking, watchman," Santa cried. "I never thought of that. Let's see, a paint box, skates, and yes, things for a mouse and a cat." "A cat and a mouse?" the watchman asked. "Then there's only one who answers that description. You want Tom, the farmer's son." While this had all been happening, Tom's mouse and cat gave up. "I think it's safe for us to say our master's out of luck," said Arthur in a tearful voice to his larger furry chum. But Puddin' made no answer. She just sat there looking glum. Far out there in the whiteness, she thought she saw some red, a glimpse at first, no more than that. But then she turned her head. "He's made it, Arthur. Come and look. He's heading up the drive with beard and sack and big black boots. Look, Santa has arrived." There still remains the mystery of Rudolph's disappearance. I hope this won't turn out to be an annual occurrence, the old man thought as home he walked through Christmas dawn so bright. But then he was astonished by an unexpected sight. "I have a troop of elephants," the circus man replied, when Santa asked politely if young Rudolph he had spied. "But I regret to tell you that I haven't any deer, though I wish you Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year." On the morning after Christmas, Santa snoozed before the fire, filled with turkey and plum pudding, and a firmly held desire to spend the rest of winter in this lazy kind of way, when all at once he heard the sound of bells from far away. The sound grew closer, closer still, until it stopped quite near. the muffled sound of hoofs on snow, and then a face appeared. At last, young Rudolph had returned, his travels to recall. But that's another story. So for now, goodbye. That's all.
In a lonely lighthouse off the rocky coast of Alaska, Christmas Eve is celebrated the same way it is in homes all over the world. The family makes their last-minute preparations for the big day tomorrow. The Christmas tree, flown in by helicopter from the mainland, is trimmed. The Christmas turkey stuffed and ready for cooking in the morning. And the children, Bill and Julie, whose parents man the lighthouse to guide the ships away from the treacherous rocks and underwater shoals which dot the Alaskan coast, like children everywhere, can hardly wait for Christmas Day and their presents. However, this time, Christmas was different. Gale-force winds had been forecast earlier in the day, and the storm was now gathering momentum. A hurricane alert had been broadcast from the radio weather station in Anchorage. Mom and Dad will probably be up all night to be ready should a distress call come in from some ship caught in the storm. And worse yet, what of Santa Claus? Can he and his reindeer fly in weather like this? Dad comes in from the bridge of the lighthouse, unbuttoning his greatcoat and rubbing his hands together to warm them up. Mother hands him a cup of tea, which he accepts gratefully. It's Christmas Eve. Why should we get weather like this on this night of all nights, he says. God bless anyone caught out in this storm. It's the worst I've seen in 10 years in this lighthouse. If someone got in trouble, the rescue boat from the mainland couldn't get out to them anyhow. Billy and Julie looked up from the floor in front of the TV, which was showing a Christmas special. Daddy, what about Santa Claus? We know it's not far from here to the North Pole, but he won't be able to fly in this storm. What about the presents for all the children? All the children in all the different countries all over the world. The lighthouse keeper looked at the children. In his eyes, you could see the concern he felt for those his job was to protect, the sailors on their ships, the aircraft who relied on his beacon to show the safe path to their destinations. But it was Christmas Eve. He had to think of something. There's a Christmas story about Santa and his sleigh and his 8 tiny reindeer that I'm going to read to you as soon as you're in your beds, he said. It's called The Night Before Christmas, and as soon as I've finished it, you'll be fast asleep. I'm sure Santa will find some way to make it. Julie and Billy had already put the cookies and milk for Santa Claus and a carrot for each of the reindeer on separate plates by the fireplace in the lighthouse living room. They got up and went to the bedroom where Mother had already turned down their beds. Father followed, carrying a colorful book which showed on its cover a laughing Santa waving as the 8 tiny reindeer towed his gift-laden sleigh through a raging snowstorm. A small child, oblivious to the conditions outside, slept happily in his bed, dreaming, no doubt, about what tomorrow would bring. The lighthouse keeper tucked the quilts around the 2 children and sat on the edge of Billy's bed. Okay, you're all resting comfortably, then I shall begin. Billy and Julie looked at their father expectantly, their eyes round and curious, for they had not heard The Night Before Christmas before. Father picked up the book and opened it. Just then, there was a mighty crash, and the room was plunged into darkness, and the door burst open, letting in the wind. Father dropped the book, ran to the door and closed it. The lights came on as the emergency generator kicked in. It's just the wind. Billy and Julie looked worried, but didn't say anything. Okay, said Father. It was the night before Christmas, he began the story, when all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter. I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters, and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wandering eye should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur, from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all covered with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye, a twist of his head, soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team, gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, as he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." The lighthouse keeper shut the book and looked at his 2 children, who, as expected, had closed their eyes and were now fast asleep. He got up quietly and tiptoed out of their room. He made his way into the living room at the lighthouse, where his wife had dozed off in the chair. The storm still raged outside, and he thought of other Christmases back in his hometown, with his parents and brothers and sisters and friends. Then he looked at the Christmas tree in the corner of the room. There were presents piled under it, glittering packages wrapped in foil with colorful ribbons around them. How could this be? He hadn't heard a thing. His wife was asleep, catching what rest she could during the emergency of the storm, for it was going to be an all-night vigil to keep the lighthouse ready to act in case anything should happen. The lighthouse keeper glanced at the fireplace, only embers now, glowing faintly, making faintly dancing shadows on the walls. Then he glanced at the plates on which Billy and Julie had carefully placed the cookies and milk for Santa and the carrots for the reindeer. They were all empty.